What I wanted to discuss with you now that I didn't talk about with the first group is just some of the self-care aspects of going through these next 8 weeks. I think it's really important. And so besides using me as a resource or each other, just a few things that I think are important to discuss and just kind of put out there first off so that you can kind of prepare yourself a little bit if you start to find that there's discomforts either in the physical body, in the emotions, in your state of mind, or different types of patterns that you see coming up, but you're not necessarily sure how to work with it. So let me start with a few things in relation to the physical body. I personally am mostly vegan, and I still have some eggs and some dairy occasionally, but I have been on this path of plant-based foods for more than 10 years. Meat has been out of my system for nearly 20 years now. And a lot of that started because it actually vibrationally just felt like it was making me sick. And once I was introduced to Innerdance was the last time that I had any seafood. And that was kind of the last thing that in a meat relation I was eating. And a lot of people find that in this work, their bodies are just getting lighter, and it's harder to consume things that take a long time for our stomachs to process. So if you eat certain foods, you might feel heavier at times, just because as energy is starting to rise up and your vibration is changing, you might actually feel a lot better just having a salad or having something really simple in your stomach as compared to things that are really heavy. So just take a look at how that might be changing over time. You might find that things you normally love, you just have a total aversion to, and you're not interested in it at all. You might find really weird cravings come up, and maybe you are a vegetarian and all of a sudden you're just craving the hamburger and you don't know why, and it's confusing and it's frustrating because you know you don't normally eat this, but for some reason you just can't get it out of your system. When this happens, I usually tell people just go for it. Try not to get into your head too much about what you should and what you shouldn't do. Try not to overthink what it is that your body is telling you, because it might be related to different mineral balances. It could be something that is just needing to experience it this one time, understand it from a new way of interacting with the energy of that food, and then it will just clear out of your system. And sometimes it's actually kind of just there as a cosmic joke. You don't know why, but it's going to be a really funny story later. Like I did Innerdance and then I just really wanted a hamburger and I haven't eaten that in forever. So just let yourself be gentle with what does come up and how, because you might find that the more you resist it, the more it just locks into your system. So when you let go of the resistance and just kind of let yourself like be okay with whatever it might be in the moment, I think that also really, really helps the energy to keep flowing, because sometimes as things are shifting inside of us, it gets stuck in our mind as the last place before things can move. And the reason it's often hard for it to shift from the mind is the resistance or the negative self-talk that we have, the things that we believe are right and wrong, good and bad, yes and no. And so much of this work is about finding that middle place, releasing a lot of the extremes, polarities, dichotomies, and separations that make it hard at times to feel like there is a middle ground. It has to be one thing or the other. So giving yourself the permission to explore the spectrum of things that come up, and not hold too tightly to any one thing at a time. When someone comes into energy work and is really, really passionate, often the passion comes from a place of wanting to be the healer. I want to share this. I want to help heal people. I want to bring change to the world. I want all of us to, be in this bubble of oneness. And I want to give this gift. And when that I is really strong, there is the sense that you are facilitating something. And throughout this course, I'm going to keep backtracking again and again. Like, you are titled as a facilitator because we don't have a lot of vocabulary as to what else to call ourselves. But a lot of times I'll go with space holder. And then the question will come up like, well, what does it mean to hold space? So I'll get back to that. But facilitators often put a lot of pressure on themselves to also be the healer, or to be the one in front of the room that is holding all of this energy, and expectation. That might be a self-expectation. It might be an expectation based on how you're presenting your event, or what you're sharing with people as to why they come to the session. And it can make things really tough. It might not feel tough in the moment. You might feel like the session went really well. Everyone was having a lot of different insights and things shifting and moving. And there was a lot of coherence in the room. But afterwards, let's say you get home and you're just exhausted, or you have to sleep, and 10 hours later, you're still not awake. And normally that's not the case. Or you get home and you have just a splitting headache, or you wake up the next day and feel super dehydrated and low energy. A lot of times this happens because there's so much need inside of us to do something, or to make something happen when we're in the room, that we are draining a lot of that energy that actually has potential to be reciprocal in the space between the self and the other, if we're able to perceive it in a way that there's always an exchange taking place. But that's not always easy. All right. So this might be new, because a lot of times practices and modalities will teach you how to be the conduit of something, how to be the one in front of the space, actually being that person who is transmitting things. If, let's say, you are, even just in this training process, we lay down for a session, or we're doing some of this remote partner work, and afterwards you do feel really tired, or you do feel a bit depleted. It's still a part of the journey. It's how things are moving through your system, and how the energy that is in you is in a complete interaction with everyone else that's in the space and everything that's coming through, and that exchange. So it's important to, one, remember that you didn't take something on that isn't yours. Okay. This isn't something that's coming from someone else that you've absorbed, that is now latched onto you, that you have to find a way to get rid of. Okay. That is a common misconception that does show up a lot, and I can elaborate on some of it later on too. And I will, because I think this is important. But I'm not going to go into all of those details today. So just know that your system is shifting. Things inside of you are changing. And it could be as simple as the balance of chemicals and minerals inside your body between your brain and your body, where you have your autoimmune system, but you also have your neuroimmune system. And there are certain things that are in a constant flow between the mind and the rest of the body. So sometimes something gets depleted because you're using so much more of its balancer. And there are a couple big things that tend to happen with energy work. So let me talk about those directly. One thing that you can do before sessions or before we jump on Zoom or even just in the break would be to give your body a little bit of an extra boost before we move into the work. Two of these nutrients that are in this type of a balance are potassium and magnesium. So often what would happen is that the magnesium gets depleted because your brain uses a lot of magnesium, and it's something that helps us to feel more calm or a little bit more balanced. When magnesium gets out of balance, we can get headaches. We can start to feel a little bit lightheaded. It's really important to keep your magnesium levels up. So minimize the potassium, like don't eat like a bunch of bananas or something beforehand, because bananas are really high in potassium. But do perhaps have some leafy greens or some chocolate. Cacao has lots of magnesium in it, so I really enjoy using that as a way to keep my magnesium levels up. And it was 11 years ago this month that I had been struck by lightning. And it was exactly 1 year after I was struck by lightning that I had my first Innerdance experience. And I'll share some more story stuff later. But after the lightning strike, I did start to get migraines a lot. And so they were pretty frequent. Over the years now, it's chilled out so much, which is great. But in energy work, because I was quite susceptible to migraines anyways, there were many times after sessions when my head was just pounding. And one of the easiest ways to help balance that out is magnesium. So I also have magnesium spray, and I'll just put it like straight onto the back of my neck, like where the brainstem and the spinal cord meet, because that's a really great place to just get it straight up into your brain to help balance out anything going on in your head. And yeah, otherwise I would say just take a look at like what you're eating and when, so that you can include things in your diet that will help support the physical body. Another thing that tends to happen is that iron levels get depleted in energy work. So this isn't something that maybe everyone knows, but I found that the next day, if I woke up and I was really tired, or I just felt more lethargic or foggy, if I had a bowl of cereal or cream of wheat, something that was high in iron, I would bounce back really quickly. So iron levels are often maintained from meat sources. So this is also why at times someone is like, I need a hamburger. Their body just is so aware that they need iron. And this is an easy go-to for our body. So if you eat meat, that's fine. And you could easily use that as a way to keep your levels maintained. For me, I usually go to nuts or legumes. And again, like anything that's a leafy green can be super helpful. So I'll put a whole lot of stuff into a smoothie, especially, and that really helps me out in the mornings as a way to get the levels back into balance if I've been doing sessions late at night, or things just like keep going on and stretching out for a long time. And the last one that is one of these types of balancers is calcium and sodium. So especially with energy work, and when the Kundalini energy starts to rise up really quickly, there's often a ton of heat in our bodies, and that heat is burning up a lot of sodium. So get yourself some electrolytes afterwards. My favorite, when I can, is coconut water or a fresh coconut if I'm in Thailand or the Philippines or somewhere I have access to this. And it's just amazing how fast a coconut can shift things back into balance. But otherwise, even just like putting some salt and lemon water together can be really helpful. So just get some of the good salts back into your body, and it'll probably start feeling a little bit better. It's important to drink lots of water so that you're also keeping yourself hydrated, because again, when that fire rises up, it also tends to move through us so quickly at the end. And if you're anything like me, like I'll be, even in the middle of winter, stripped down to a tank top and shorts and I'm holding a session, and afterwards instantly I am just frozen, and all of the feminine energy comes back, and I have to like wrap myself, and it could be super, super hot out and I still have a chill where the goosebumps are still so present after moving through such intense work with people. It's almost like I feel like I don't have skin, so I need to cover myself with something in order to like even just feel my body again. And then that's when the heat just drops. It's not there anymore. And then that can be confusing because you might not feel like you're dehydrated or that you need all this extra electrolytes, but just keep this in mind as a way to replenish your system and keep yourself in a good physical condition. I often do energy school or immersions alongside of a detox retreat. So the original space for Innerdance in the Philippines was a retreat center called Bahay Kalipai. And I helped manage that space for a few years and did a lot of the Innerdance there. It was a raw food and yoga detox center that was founded by Pai and his past partner. And everybody that joined us for those 5-day or 10-day processes was on a raw food diet the entire time, eating a lot of coconuts and being really simple with their diet. And that automatically starts to change things, whether or not you're doing Innerdance. But get into a really light diet and then do energy work that also brings your vibration higher. And the combination can be extremely powerful, maybe even a little bit too much sometimes for people if they were used to eating much heavier foods before joining us. And you can see the detox happening as people are moving through this work. So eating light foods can be really helpful just to keep your energy up. So it doesn't feel like when you go into a session, the energy spikes up and then you eat a big heavy meal and it just drops again, because it'll end up feeling like you're going through extremes in a roller coaster. So when I do these retreats with people now, I usually make sure to keep everyone on a really simple diet. And I'll include lots of detox teas or teas that are just really helpful for keeping the emotions stable. So for example, lemongrass is really good, and that one's good for mood boosting, as well as just that sense of like happiness. It helps with depression. It helps with anxiety. So lemongrass can be a really good one. If you start to feel like things are coming through your physical body in a way that does, let's say, affect the digestive system, or maybe even at the level of the skin, turmeric can be really good as an anti-inflammatory and anti-pain relief. And turmeric in that way can also help support some of the emotions that come up that feel really painful. So there's this interesting thing in our brain that happens. The same part of our brain that experiences the pain of a headache also is attached to rejection So if you're feeling rejection, you could actually take a like an aspirin or an ibuprofen, and you'd stop feeling the feelings of rejection in the same way that you'd stop feeling the feelings of a headache or the pain of a headache. So I don't usually recommend people to take over the counters, but this is where turmeric could be really helpful. So seeing what kind of natural things you could include that might give additional support to your physical body. And if you ever have questions or you are going through something specific and you want to know a couple different things you could try, I'm a great resource for that. I love natural medicines. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a practitioner, but I'm a self-learned practitioner of the natural medicines. And I've been working with them for so many years. So I use this as a way to really help support people in this work, because it's not just energy, and our physical bodies need self-care as well. And there are ways for us to support that without just feeling like we're all over the place because the energy is in motion and it hasn't yet restabilized. You're going to find that as we go through these next 8 weeks, what your normal state of homeostasis is probably going to change. So our bodies are really good at keeping us on track when we're super busy or when we're stressed or when we've got too much going on. It keeps us where we need to be so that we don't get sick, so that we can, keep going one more day, one more week, one more year before you get to your next holiday or vacation. And that often tends to lead people into a crash once they get on their holiday. If you've ever heard stories of people that, work really hard, their, 8 to 7 job, and they finally go on vacation and they're like, yeah, and then the first day I just got so sick. And I think one of the hardest things is that feeling that you're sick, rather than the feeling that you are detoxifying all of these emotions, all of this buildup of stress that's been in your system, and it's finally getting a chance to release. Your physical body is often the last to release all sorts of information that's been stored inside of you. So if we are doing this work and you have a really profound emotional release, or your mind seems to go to a place you've never been before, or you start experiencing all different types of sensations in your body and electricity that you haven't felt so strong before, it might take a little longer for you to see something come up in your physical body, but a lot of the time something usually does. It can be very quick, so that by the time we finish a session, you realize like, okay, I don't feel so well. There have been many times in the middle of sessions when there's energetic vomit or physical vomit coming through, because your stomach is just, it's purging, it's releasing. And I'm happy to give support when things like this happen. And it's always a little uncomfortable because it's real, but at the same time, I have so much empathy for how much gets stored inside of us, and how powerful this work is in relation to like just getting it out, letting it go, giving it back for good so that it's not there anymore. At the end of the last training that I just did, it took about 2 weeks. And that was when my body started to purge. I had some really strange kind of, I don't know what to call it, but a lot of inflammation and seeming little like infections or something that were just kind of all on my head and my neck and in the back. And it was really painful and a lot of swelling, and it was fine because I knew that I had just finished doing an 8-week course and there was a lot of stuff happening and so much energy moving that it would be weird if something didn't come through my system. And then it's really about like being gentle, taking it slow, not overreacting and needing to instantly go to a doctor. A lot of times what happens is someone goes to a doctor and the doctor can't find anything wrong. And that's strange. It's uncomfortable. People that might have lots of flu symptoms, fever that's just coming and going, things they can't really explain, and they want the doctor to give them the answer, and the doctor can't even answer it. And most of the time it's because this is energetic. So our physical body doesn't know the difference between what is the energetic release and what is an actual sickness or a virus or something. It comes up in the same way because we only have so many different organs and body parts through which we can process information. So take your time with things. If you do feel uncomfortable or you have a pain, and maybe let's say it seems like, for example, an old injury is now starting to act up again. This can make people feel a little insecure or afraid that what they're doing is harming their body. And when this comes up in particular, I usually let people know, if you allow yourself to feel the pain without being afraid that you've re-triggered a trauma from something that happened in the past, it's probably going to go much, much faster than if you had re-injured it. And it's a lot less likely to ever come back if you give yourself this time right now to just feel it for what it is, rather than worrying that there's something wrong. Because when the fear that there's something wrong creeps in, instantly the body starts to react to your reaction. And then it doesn't really have a lot of space to come into an actual shift. But although there are times when the physical healing comes instantaneously and someone's symptoms never return again, there are also a lot of times when the way to get to the actual healing is to let yourself trust that it's okay to feel what it is and be with it fully, without needing to fix it, so that the less you try to fix it, the more it actually heals. All right. Again, if anything like this does happen to come up in the time of the course, I'm happy to, work with you one-on-one a little bit, have a private chat, jump on a Zoom call outside of our group sessions, just so that I can also just, be there as someone who can just listen to you if anything is coming up, because sometimes we just need to be able to speak about it and know that someone's listening from a compassionate middle place, and even just that can start to again bring us back into the spectrum of possibilities and to see it from different perspectives that we might not have been able to see when we were stuck inside of our own narrative or the feedback loops that can get really tight. I spend a lot of time right now in solitude, just because I just landed in Florida and I don't have any friends here. So I'm not engaging in things in like the community at the moment. And my mom she's like 2 hours away, so I don't see her that much. But when that release came through for me 2 weeks after I had finished the last training, I knew my brain was spiraling. I was very aware of that. But being aware that my brain is spiraling doesn't stop it. So it was really important for me to connect with a friend and go spend some time with another person, even just to be in like physical connection with another person, whether he was doing anything in particular or not. I just needed human contact as a way for my brain to just chill out. So sometimes we need the opposite. We need to be alone. We need to like process this on our own. We need to let go of all the different things, scenarios, ways in which other people are trying to fix us, and just sit with it. And for me, I needed to have human contact so that my brain wasn't gonna just listen to itself and talk back and forth so much. I've got a lot of Gemini in my charts, so if astrology means anything to you, there's a lot of like jibber jabber that kind of goes on. So these are just different things to think about and to just kind of take slowly. I'm spitting out a lot of information right now, but know that there's a lot of ways we can support what is coming up as it happens, so that you don't feel incapable of going through your daily life. When we do intensives and it's 5 days, it's 10 days, and people are in a retreat setting and they are immersing in this work from 10 a.m. until 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. and it's days in a row, there is so much that just pours through. It just explodes sometimes. But you're in the container and it's going to be there to hold you until you leave. And then that's when you go through the reintegration process. And that's usually when I might say the inner dance is about to begin. You went through this whole 10 days and now is when your inner dance starts. As soon as you go back home, or as soon as you have that first phone call with your mom or your dad, as soon as you go back to your job, that's when the real work happens. So when we're going through this in a slower pace, although it is going to be a lot in these 8 weeks, you'll still have to have daily interactions with people or what is normal for you. So there might be times when it doesn't feel as easy, or when you feel like you're in a dream world, so you don't know how to do the same daily types of functioning that you're used to. And that can be strange. But the more that you're able to also come back to the observer of yourself in those moments, the more that you'll find the self-compassion to be with whatever it is that is happening, and find ways of coming back into that state of flow.
I have a question on fasting. I do a dry fast once a month. So dry, no water, nothing. And I usually go for 38 hours. Would you suggest I make sure to not fit this on a day that we're doing a tune in, or in actual fact, would that be kind of an awesome thing to try and do? I know that's very personal to me and I don't know how many other people do that, but I was like, ooh, this could be a fun little experience. And I'd love to have an idea of what you think about that.
Okay. I was going to touch base on fasting earlier. Maybe I just even picked up that there was someone in this space who might resonate. Fasting is amazing. There are times when we would have these retreats in the eco village or even at the Beingness Center, and just encourage people, just have coconuts, just see what it's like to just have coconuts for 24 hours. Or, explore what it's like just to have water. And there have been times when someone's like, okay, sure, I'll just drink water for today. And then before you know it, 5 days later, 10 days later, their mind is blown because they're still just drinking water and they had no idea they were about to get there and that it was going to change things so much. Fasting can be such a fast track way to lightness in the physical body, the emotional body. Most of the time, I tell people when they're going into a fast, if it's not something that you do often, you need to give yourself at least 3 days before your emotions are going to start detoxing. But although you might feel some of the physical discomforts within the first 24 hours, you're going to hit one of those moments when all your emotions just start pouring out if you're not used to this, because they are some of the hardest things to get to detox, especially when we eat all the time, because then all of the energy is in our stomach and that's where all the processing is constantly happening. So we never really get to the emotions. This is why we end up dreaming in our subconscious, and often emotions come up in our dreams that we haven't had a chance to get to during the day, because we are fasting when we're sleeping. So finally, after each of your organs have a chance to detoxify and cleanse, you get to your emotions. And that's also why you dream the most in those early hours before waking up, because finally you get a chance to start getting through your emotions. So when you go into a fasting mode, you're on a fast track to clear things from the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, especially once you get to like day 5 and your mind is like, wait, I mean, maybe I'm not hungry, but do I want to eat? I love the taste of food. And I know I'm not that hungry. It's my mind that's hungry. And then you get to like the mental detox. And then somewhere around day 5 is often when the internal energy kicks on, and you have more energy to do more things physically than you would have if you hadn't ever done a fast before. I have swam faster, longer, and with way less time being tired. Same with running. When I'm fasting, my body just seems to pick up so much internal energy, and it's this incredible catalyst to see how much actually comes from inside of us, that we don't need to rely on anything external in order to experience super fully. Wow, it's really empowering. So I have also facilitated detox and fasting retreats for people, and I'm a big proponent of it. I know, of course, there are side effects, or there are times in which people take this too far, but in relation to energy work, it goes hand in hand a lot of the time, and can be a really powerful way to continue just seeing what else might come through. And when people have worked with me one-on-one in group settings and they're fasting, a lot of times they're clearing through things really, really quickly. And it's happening at a faster rate because of the lightness. So this is why I start off saying like, light foods are really good. But then take it a little bit further, fasting can be great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect. I will do my fast on one of our days. I don't know. It goes over 2 days anyway, so I'll make it work. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And there are times for me now, because of the number of years that I've done very, very strict fasting regimens in extended periods of time, my body just knows, and I trust it. If my body wakes up and I'm not consuming anything, I just kind of let it go. I don't think about it like, oh, should I be eating something? And because I'm not an emotional eater, it's not usually that I'm consuming things to try and like feed my emotions. So if my body just goes into fasting mode, I appreciate it. I love that my system lets me know what it needs, and when not to take anything else in, so that I can just keep going through whatever it is. And so I think the last one happened around the eclipse. So it was just kind of syncing up. It happened, and I was like, okay, trust that. There's a big eclipse coming, so let's just let all of this come out, and I think we'll probably feel really good afterwards. And that might happen for you in this work, is that someday you wake up and you're like, I'm just not hungry. Is there something wrong? Like, should I eat something then? See what it feels like. Explore it a little bit. You might feel a little bit more tired because you're not eating anything. But if your stomach isn't actually talking to you, it is safe to not have to eat. And then just see what else might be able to be processed in that way afterwards. It's easy for our mind to want to keep things organized the same way that it was before. But if in this process, the wiring that is maybe within you as a programming for a very long time begins to change, or that breaks down and it dissolves, and neuroplasticity starts to open up, and now there's a multiplicity of synoptic connections in relation to what you normally have as an organized train of thought or way of doing things, it's like your brain knows that it can't do it the same way anymore, but it's not sure exactly which way to do it now. So part of it might be in resistance. I just want to do it that way again, or how come it's not working this way anymore? And yet, like that part of you has kind of died off. That neural connection isn't as strong anymore, and there's a lot of opportunity, but that can feel confusing, especially if it still seems like an unknown. You don't know which way it's going to move with you, or what way for you to step into that river to flow with it, because you don't know where it's taking you. And you were on this great ride for so long, and now your boat tipped over and you're just hanging onto a log. And it's challenging sometimes. So just be patient with yourself. Know that the more that you also trust what it is that has already changed, the more that you will start to be that change. But a lot of what we might say in this work is that you're coming into a remembrance, a much deeper remembrance of what are our human origins, what is the deep history of our planet, of the relationship to our modern version of the Homo sapien as a species, in connection with what came before as to how we even got here. And as some of the hierarchical programming in your mind or in your story also begins to dissolve, because it comes into more of a multiplicity or a less linear way of explaining your own life story, there's both a breaking down and a breaking through. And it's okay not to know, and it's okay to go through the uncertainties, and to give yourself permission to be within the stages of growth that are innately a part of being a more conscious being. So as you're in this change, you're in a state of becoming, and allowing for the becoming to eventually solidify into the being is really important. So with this work, it is a becoming, and it's a becoming more of the memory, so that the more of you begins to remember, the more you begin to become, and then the more that becomes a part of your being. So give yourself space and time and patience to be in that becoming, so that it also does become more of the embodied state of being that can continue to empower you into whatever's next for your life, or what you're looking to experience, or what you're on the path towards remembrance for. And I love that about this work, is that the more I find people opening to it, it's not because it's new. It's because they remember something. Their cells remember something. The electricity in their body remembers something. That awakening of Kundalini is always there. If that is the coiled sleeping serpent at the base of the spine, it's always there. So it isn't new. It's just you might not have remembered that it was also always awake. And the only thing that made it asleep was the conditioning of our global systems, or our cultures, our religions, our worldviews, the things that seem to disempower us and keep us away from what is always flowing and in motion. So be gentle with yourselves. We, as humans, we are the children of our ancestors. And I might refer to generational imprints, to ancestral traumas, or to the thread within our DNA that is passed down for generations. Because one, that is a part of how we got to be here. But I also do a lot of work with family constellations, and I deeply, deeply appreciate this work. It is like opening up a book that could only exist within primary orality. And once the constellation is closed, the book is closed. You don't need to know the exact story, but it's the energy threads that you're tapping into. And within Innerdance, it's very similar. So in certain aspects of Innerdance, we go into these life regressions that can bring up either childhood traumas or past life experiences, or perhaps experiences of our ancestors, or even just these deeper origins of humanity, where you remember yourself as the Queen of Egypt or as a Native American around the fire circle. And it feels very real. It feels as though you are that person. At a statistical level within your DNA structure, most of us actually were some really important person in Egypt or in India, because these are the bloodlines that actually continued. So if you go back far enough, we all came from a very few select number of ancestors, and most of them were the procreators of the generations that were going to survive. It's not going to be the poor person on the street who's barely surviving that is your ancestor, because the generations didn't tend to continue from them. And there's a lot of really beautiful scientific evidence for this, so I'll throw some of that stuff in later on. But just as like a building point, within the energy field, and especially what comes through with Innerdance, when people do tap into this work through some of this life review, which doesn't necessarily mean it's just your life that you're reviewing, there are many parts of the ancestral field that open up and become a waking part of our consciousness. That part of our consciousness begins to wake up in a way that usually doesn't happen when we are just thinking with our eyes open about our life, or the way that our story has been unfolding from the time we were born until now. So I do bring in different ways of taking a look at the lineage and the lineages that we come from, to help us understand what is happening in our mind. Why is my brain thinking this way? Why is it that this thought is here, or this fear is here? I know I'm safe in my home, but why do I feel so unsafe, or feel like this one can come up a lot, is like my throat chakra is blocked. I can't speak my truth. I don't know why, but I feel very small when it comes to speaking things, or because I'm not able to speak what I want to say, it's creating other blockages in my system. So the mind and the psychologies of the mind are often very connected to the behavioral development patterns that we go through as we are growing up, but as well, what is ancestral. So when your mind starts to get really tight into anxieties or stress, or even panic modes, know that there might be things you're carrying in relation to these imprints that are playing out in a way that can feel very, very personal. And yes, you still have to work through it. It's still in your mind. Yeah. But it can also be really, really helpful to take a look at what came before you, as to how you got to where you are, or what way was it that it's the grandparents inside your parents that actually raised you. And for those of us who are women, like in my mom's, when my sister was inside my mom's belly, her daughter was also inside of my mom, because those eggs were inside of the fetus inside of my mom, before my sister was even born. And so her daughter was inside of her while she was still in my mom. And so the grandchild is inside the grandmother, especially when it's in the feminine form. So these are literal interpretations, but as well, energetic ones. It's like it's the mother who raised the parent that raised the child, and you'll see it in someone's eyes, or you'll be able to kind of like feel some of this out. So this is a lot of information. I'm gonna stop on this part for right now, but especially when we're going through a lot of the the fears and the feedback loops, the narratives that just seem to keep spiraling, or that it's just really hard to get out of. A lot of the times, I might take people into a bit of mapping work to look at the history of their family in some way, as a way to help sort some of these patterns. I'll bring this up from time to time as we're going through the weeks, but just know that most of the time you're just not alone in what your mind is going through, and so many of us are experiencing things very, very similarly, even if the stories seem really different. When it comes to the emotions, I'll go to that next. Know that it's good to let things out. It's good to release. It's good to have moments when it just seems like chaos. Chaos is innately feminine. And if the feminine energy is chaotic, it's not meant to be controlled or seem completely rational. And our emotions do come from a lot more of feminine feeling, and feeling from what is feminine within us. And that often brings emotions to the surface. And so they don't follow rules. Emotions, they don't know rules. And the logical part of the brain likes to believe that it can control emotions to make them, do what we want, or not show up, or go back down. And we're good at suppressing them, especially in the West. And it is a common way in which even in psychology, therapists will teach you how to control your emotions so that you just don't feel so bad or feel so overwhelmed by them. And I think in this work, we do almost the opposite. It would be more allow it to be released in order for it to not need to be suppressed. And when you do let things come through, and you take the time just to be with it in that moment, they tend to show up a lot less in the future, or they're softer, or you can relate to why it's there. And it might not be personal. In this work, especially when it comes to emotions, you might be tapping into something that is completely collective. Okay. I know how much of this was showing up in 2020 and 2021. Like I said, I lived on Koh Phangan during that time, and it's this very beautiful, very magical island. It's a crystal. There's all sorts of good vibes everywhere. And yet in 2020, even though we weren't as restricted there as so many other parts of Asia and parts of the world, the fear of death, the feelings of loss, the insecurities and the unknowns of like, what is happening right now, it was very strong. So although I could wake up every day to, beautiful skies and beaches and sunsets, and everything just seemed magical, there were things that I could feel in my system that I knew were a huge part of the collective, and that aspect of consciousness that is completely shared, because we are an organism of this planet and things just aren't as separate as sometimes we believe them to be. So when you go into a space like within Innerdance and you're in that spaciousness, a lot of times things will come through. You might find tears just streaming from your face, but you're not sad. It's not personal. You don't know why they're there. It doesn't seem to make any sense because your narrative has no connection to that emotion whatsoever. And yet here it is. It's coming and it's coming, and you can't really explain it. So there are times this might happen after we get off a call or in the days when we're not together. You might become more sensitive to the whole as your own personal parts begin to dissolve more and more. That doesn't mean that you're going to be free of emotions. A lot of times it means they might actually come up more frequently, or you might just need to give yourself a little bit more space and compassion to be with what you're feeling, because you don't have an answer for it. And it isn't something personal as to why you're feeling it. So that's okay. For all of us that do energy work, like we know, we're working with the whole thing all the time. And that means that, yeah, maybe one day you're unconsciously or subconsciously tapping into a war or to a genocide or a famine, or to this has come up so many times, would be like the abuses against women, and sometimes it'll come up in the Innerdance, and that one can take time, because that maybe you yourself never experienced that type of abuse, but why does it feel like I did? And that's been questions that I've experienced before, where participants afterwards feel really uncomfortable. I know that didn't happen to me in my childhood or in my teenage years, and definitely not in my adult life. So why do I feel like this is so real? And you now become a part of the catalyst for that change, because you're conscious of it, because you're feeling it, and because you are embracing a part of the much greater story that is humanity, as compared to that which is just your own personal life. So take the time, know that it's okay. And it doesn't mean, again, that you've absorbed something that doesn't belong to you, but we are all connected, and it is a part of what makes us human. So in some part of the cellular level of each of us, even if it's not your story, maybe it was your grandmother's story, maybe it was a part of the history of your ancestors, maybe it's there because you didn't personally experience it. So you have the strength to look at it in a way that someone who had trauma associated with it might not be able to process. So by you being strong enough to process it, you're supporting all of those that are still struggling through it. And even if you never have a direct interaction with that person, you might, and you might not know it. And it might just be that now, because this is a part of an embodied wisdom for you, you're naturally going to be vibrating to the shift in your own experience when you interact with anyone that you meet. So you might not ever talk about it, but it doesn't mean it isn't there somehow. So as you internalize what you are experiencing, know that that also becomes a part of your vibratory resonance that has an empathy for everyone who's ever experienced any of these types of traumas. And you're going to be able to empathically connect with them, even if you're not sharing direct stories. It's going to just be a part of how that exchange happens. This is how the coherence of the heart continues to build and grow and allow for us to share in these changes of consciousness that make us feel more connected than alone. So yeah, this one can be tough at times. But again, happy to also just kind of do mapping work with any of you if things seem confusing. The last one that I want to talk about is the spiritual self-care. And for this, there are many times when people might ask me, like, what do you do before a session? Like, how do you protect yourself? Or like, what are your rituals? In what way are you, making sure that you create a safe space? Or what is your daily practice? Do you do Innerdance every single day? Like, how many times a week is this okay to do? I don't always have the same exact answer, but for the most part, my answer within like what kind of do you meditate every day or what's your practice? Life is my practice. And I appreciate every moment as a ritual or as a spiritual experience. I appreciate sitting in stillness and not thinking, or getting myself to a space where I don't have so many thoughts, so that just sitting outside and looking at the trees or listening to the wind or watching the color change at sunrise and sunset is my meditation. I will lay down to some of the soundscapes and do Innerdance on my own. Most of the time when I do that, it's at night. So I'll put something on before I go to sleep, and it just sends me off into a totally different sleep state. It gets really trancy, and then I'll know like the music ended, but I can't move. And so I can't take my headphones out yet. And then I totally drift off. And then hours later, I'll realize my headphones are still in and it's uncomfortable, and finally be able to move them off my head and do the rest of my night of sleep. I find that really entertaining. So it's why I also just do it, because I think it's quite nice sometimes not to just drift off, but to, instead of, it's more like drifting in rather than drifting off. Yeah. And so I can really appreciate using the music in that way. And I try not to take things too seriously. I really appreciate just being able to be light about things, see the cosmic joke in it. This is a huge discipline for me, is to constantly open myself back up to many different perspectives. I appreciate being within a state of cognitive resonance, which means I can't try to solve problems most of the time. I can't try to fix things most of the time, because as soon as we try to problem solve or fix things, we enter into a state of cognitive dissonance. There are ways in which our brain is hardwired towards dissonance as a model for fixing things. But most of the time, it just keeps us in a state of tension, because there is a right and a wrong, a good and a bad. And this is what powers still a lot of our global systems, is the fight. Telling someone that my side is correct and yours isn't. And in, for example, America right now, I would say that opinionated culture has gotten extremely strong, and more so in recent years. It's really hard to talk to people without them just spitting out opinions, and opinions tend to hold a lot of judgment. So to be in a state where you're not in judgment means you have to engage in a different type of conversation. So in Innerdance, we focus a lot on dialogue. Although I know I've been talking for a really long time right now, and that's not super dialogic. We will do the best we can as we go through things to kind of keep the dialogue alive. And in the sharings, especially, I feel like we come from a very different state of listening. No one's thinking about what to say next before the other person finishes. And a lot of times you're not even going to know what you want to say until you've listened to someone else speak, because there's so much more resonance. And when we're in that state of resonance, it just keeps flowing and it opens us up to beautiful synchronicities with the universe, and how much more beautiful things can be when things just seem to come and fall into place, and there's not a lot of work that needs to be done because you're not trying to make something happen. So I have really incredible synchronicities in my life. I'm so grateful for them. I spend a lot of time in nature when I can, just so that I can also experience the synchronicities of the natural world. And this is my practice. Just this constant appreciation for everything around me, so that I never get too caught up in what seems challenging or difficult. And it can just be as simple as, seeing 1111 and then suddenly it's like, okay, cool, everything's good now. We've got the number thing in check, and we can move forward. So there's an element of mindfulness in the experience of life. And I'll talk a lot more about cognitive resonance later on, so that I can help bring some science to it, so that it can also be more of a feedback system for you rather than something I'm just saying right now. When it comes to protection, I will also talk more about this later, but I don't have anything that I set as a standard or an expectation for people who are joining, or for participants, or for anyone who decides to facilitate this work after. It's personal preference in a lot of ways. Some people are really attached to their sage, and they're never going to hold space for a group of people without smudging the space with sage or Palo Santo. And if that's something that you do, or you appreciate, or you are already working with, you are most welcome to bring that into this work. If you find that you feel a lot more centered and focused and calm by doing a meditation where you put yourself into a ball of light, or maybe into a Merkaba, or you allow yourself to connect with like the angels and source energy, and maybe your own ancestors, and you bring that into a space of loving presence in that moment, so that you also feel like your guides are there with you, then that's also okay. This is for each of us going to be different, because we each find we connect with that which is moving through us, empowering us, enabling us to actually be present in a space with others in different ways. And so for me, it might actually just be as simple as putting cushions in a circle around a space, so that when people enter to the room, they're automatically going to sit in a circle. And for me, the circle is a very sacred geometry form that brings us into equality and into that equanimity that also allows for things to continue flowing in reciprocity through that group experience, rather than one person leading things. And so I don't usually put myself in front of a room. I make sure that like there's a circle for everyone to be connected in, so that we all have that sense of equality. And that for me is already very powerful. So it can be sometimes just as simple as that. If you are religious and you work with prayer, you can definitely pray whatever it might be that would make you feel safe in that moment, or to feel more connected with who you're working with. Do what feels good for you, because this is going to be what also helps you to feel spiritually in trust with this process, with yourself, and with the work that you're sharing. So I won't tell you what is right or wrong in this way, but do things that make you feel good and make you feel like you're ready so that you can show up just in the best way possible. Yeah. Yeah, I love using essential oils and incense, or definitely sage and santo. And I have another one that I like. It's called bear root or osha root. So in sessions, if especially I feel like there's a need to move energy in some way, I'll go straight to these kind of things to introduce it to the space, to also just keep shifting where I feel like the energy is at. And that's very intuitive. So although I have these resources, they don't always come through. Sometimes even in the online space, I'll be burning something on this side, and it's for everybody. Even though it can't really come through the computer, like I trust it. So I'll do things like that as well.
Journaling, is it suggested? I don't know, maybe you said it. My internet cuts out every, I don't know, 45 minutes or something. So I have to get back on. Did you touch on that? Like, obviously, is that suggested as overall, or is that something also, like, already jumping into the facilitated part, is that something we suggest is a good form to process as well when people have come out of an inner dance that maybe have really felt a lot?
Especially when I do longer processes with people, immersions, trainings, things that go on for a few days, I do encourage people to have a notebook with them in case they do feel like writing something down after they get through the experience. Sometimes when we're in a really big group, it's 20 people, 30 people, it's going to take a while before the circle gets around to you in order to share. So it can be helpful to kind of remember a few things just by writing it down. I mentioned in the call earlier today about the journal questions that are on each of the pages of the 11-week course for the principles of facilitation. So if while we're going through this course, you want any type of prompt as a guideline for taking a look at things related to inner dance, the chakra system, key of 7, the mandala, the energies connected to each of the colors, there are questions on each of those pages that you can feel free to look at or use or work with in your own pace. And for those that like to write, we've even had a really beautiful inner dance facilitator who during the inner dance found it was more constructive for her system to organize the inner dance energy by writing or typing things out on her iPad as she's in the inner dance. So she'd lay down for a little bit and then things would pop through and she'd just start writing things down, and then she'd lay back down again and then it would come through again. So that was really cool. We've done inner dance with art before. So if you are someone who likes to draw and you want to be in the process while also like just seeing what kind of things come through in a visual way, you're most welcome to do that. I found myself in the early days of inner dance just with my eyes closed. I had a pen in my hand and either it was just moving and making something from my subconscious mind, or I was writing things. And I had no idea until I was out of the process when I looked back at my chicken scratch because my eyes were closed, that I was like, oh, that's really good. I should remember that. So there's lots of ways that you can bring different things into the process with you, or to work with something afterwards. And there are a lot of soundscapes in that 11-week course, and there will be ones from the first training as well as the ones we listen to in our course pages. So at any time, if you want to journey into this work on your own or outside of our time together, feel free to grab some music, explore how you're going to do that, and then also just see what might come through.